G'day everyone, let me show you this new amazing feature in Photoshop Beta called Generative Fill. My name is Hoi, and in this video, I'll walk you through how you can add, extend, or remove content from your images non-destructively simply by using text prompts in Photoshop Beta. This video isn't really a follow-along tutorial, but more of a show and tell. But if you want to follow along with the exact images that I'm using, I've linked all the images in the description. Okay, so before we get started with Generative Fill, let's see how we can first access it. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this is available in Photoshop Beta, not your normal Photoshop. So to access Photoshop Beta, let's go to our Creative Cloud app here. And I'm on my apps tab here, and before we download the beta version, let's click on the updates option here and then click on check for updates. Now this is really important because previous versions of Photoshop Beta might still be 24.6, but it won't have Generative Fill. I made the same mistake as not checking for updates, and then when I logged on into Photoshop Beta, I couldn't find the Generative Fill option. So make sure that you check for updates. After you've done that, click on Beta Apps. A list of beta apps will show here. Now I've already downloaded Photoshop Beta, which is why my option here says open. But if you haven't downloaded it, it will have a button called install. So go ahead and install that, and then once you're okay, click on open. Now I'm not going to open it here because I've already got it open in the background. Before we begin, just double check that we are working in Photoshop Beta and not your normal regular Photoshop. That's really important because you won't find this option in the regular Photoshop. In this video, I'll use a number of pictures just to see what Generative Fill can do. So let's open the first one. I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to click on the first picture and then press open. Now the first thing that you'll notice is that we have this contextual taskbar here. Now if you've downloaded the latest version of Photoshop, the regular Photoshop, not Beta, you'll also notice this contextual taskbar here. Now this taskbar is really important because it's one of the ways that you can access the Generative Fill. So if you don't see that option, just go to Window and make sure that contextual taskbar is selected. Now, as I mentioned, Generative Fill can generate objects, backgrounds, extend images, and remove backgrounds and people. So let's put it to the test with this image. The first thing that I'm going to do is extend this image. So to do that, I'm going to use my crop tool, C on my keyboard, and then I'm going to press Option or Alt and then just drag it out. And the reason why I'm pressing Option or Alt is just to simultaneously stretch out the left side and the right side. So one of the things with Generative Fill is that you've got to make selection. So the two options are the marquee tool. Just remember the shortcut, which is M. And then if you want to use the elliptical marquee tool, then press Shift M to cycle through it. The next selection tool is the lasso tool. Again, the keyboard shortcut is L, and then you can cycle through it with Shift L. I don't really use Shift option here to cycle through, and I'll show you why a little bit later. But for the time being, let's press M on our keyboard, or you can select the rectangular marquee tool here and just click and drag over the empty space. Now I'm going to go over a little bit over the picture here, and then I'm going to add to the selection by pressing Shift and then just add it to there. Whoops. I'm not sure what happened there. Just going to put it in center again. And then you'll notice that there is a Generative Fill option here. And because I just want to extend the background, I'm not going to put anything here. Now there's a button here called Generate. Now you can see that when I hover it, it activates the option here. Now I've heard that for some people this is grayed out, and if that's your case, then it's most likely because that your date of birth in Adobe's profile is under 18 years old. So you've got to be over 18 to use this new feature. So if that's the case, then what you can do is go to behance.net, and hopefully there's a prompt to enter in your date of birth. If you don't get that prompt, what you can do is reach out to Adobe customer support via their chat, and I've provided a link to that in the description. Okay, so let's return back to this. Let's click on generate, and Photoshop will have a think about it. You actually need a internet connection. What it's doing now is talking to Adobe AI system over the cloud. So you do need to be connected to the internet. This is amazing, isn't it? So with a click of a button and maybe around about 10 seconds, I've got this new background which looks really realistic. Now, as you can see here, there are 3 options that are generated. You can click on this button to go forward. So this is great as well. And then this is great. Now you can see in the properties panel, I can also see my 3 variations. Now you have a number of options, so you can see these 3 dots here. So if I click on that, I can say, well, I don't really like this, I'm going to delete it. And the reason why that you might want to delete all these variations is that it does increase the size of your photo. So if I go down to my menu bar here and select document sizes, you can see that the original file is just above 50 megabytes, and now with these variations is 88.7 megabytes. So you can imagine the more variations that I generate, the larger the file is. Now all these 3 options are excellent to me, so it doesn't really matter which I choose. But if you wanted to generate more options because it doesn't hit the spot, you can either click generate here, or you can go to your properties and click generate, which I'm going to do here. Now it does take a while. It's around about, in my experience playing around with it, around about 15, maybe even 20 seconds. There are a few odd times where it does hang and then you have to press cancel. So now it's created another 3 variations. So each time you generate, it creates 3 other variations, and this looks fantastic. This is great. I can't believe that with a click of a button, it's generated all these great options here. Now let's settle on, say, this one here. Now the one caveat, well, there's a lot of caveats, but the one that I'm going to highlight here is that it looks great at a distance like this. But if I zoom in to roughly here, to roughly where the edge is, you can see that there are blurry edges here. So here is the original image, and then here is the generated image. So you can see that the resolution, if I just zoom in a little bit more, is not quite as good as the original image. And the reason for this is because Adobe generates 1024 pixels wide by 1024 pixels high. And then if you've selected an area more than that, then it simply just stretches out that image, which is why you see this blur here. Now, one workaround is that you can obviously select 1024 squares each at a time and then generate that. So if you really wanted to do that, then you select your marquee tool, clicking here or M on your keyboard, and then go to style and go to fix size. And I've already played around with this, so I've done it 1024 pixels wide and 1024 pixels high, and then I'm just going to click once here and it's made a square here. I can move that around, just hover inside the selection and then just move it around here, and then you can ask it to generate again. Now obviously the downside of that is that you've got to do it multiple times. Now I'm going to deselect that by pressing Command or Control D, and what I'm going to do is just to test out this a little bit more. So somewhere around here I'm going to put a sort of a lake or a pond here. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool, L for my lasso tool, and then just going to draw something like this. Type in reflective lake, press enter. And this looks pretty good. You can see that it's also done the shadows that is consistent with the lighting. That's fantastic, isn't it? It's also taken into consideration the reflection, because I've written here reflective lake. I don't really like this though, so I'm going to cycle through my options. That's not what I'm after. I'm not a big fan of all these options. So I'm just going to generate it again. So let's cycle through that again. So even though I said this isn't really what I'm after, this is probably the best option out of all of them. I mean, you can always keep generating, but for the purpose of this video, I won't. Now let's just take a little bit of time to explain what's going on here, how it gets its images. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So what Generative Fill is doing is using Adobe stock and coming up with this image here. So it's generating this image. So it's not just copying and pasting it from a image that it found on Adobe stock. It's learning from the 344 million plus photos that Adobe has in their Adobe stock. Now, what I want to highlight is that each time it generates something, it actually generates pixels. There's no transparencies. So what does that mean? I'm just going to lift that out. You see that it's generated the pixels around it to replicate the surroundings. So you might not think that it's a big deal. I'm just going to undo that by pressing Command or Control Z. But if you decide that you want to resize this or move this around, then that means it's not going to work. And just say I want it a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to stretch that out. So you can see that it doesn't work now because these edges that are generated doesn't fit in with the surroundings. So if you want to move it or change the size of the generative fill, then you have to do it again. This is probably not what I want. This is probably the closest. So I'm not going to regenerate it again, but you can see that the other option is that you can mask the area out. So again, these are just normal layers here. This is a mask here and this is the layer. Now I should have mentioned that this new icon here, this sparkling layer here, means that it's a generative layer. Now if I wanted to mask this out, all I need to do is click on this, B for my brush tool, and then just mask it out as I would with any other photo. So just going to do a rough outline here, and then you can resize it as you like. So Generative Fill is not likely going to be able to do 100% of what you want to do. So if you're worried about this technology, then I think, well, at least for me at this stage, I'm not too worried about it, because you still need your traditional Photoshop skills to continue to manipulate and adjust and edit your images. So let's try another thing. So I'm going to put an elephant drinking from this pond or lake here. So I'm just going to press L on my keyboard for my lasso tool and just draw out what I think should be the size of the elephant here, and then click on Generative Fill. Now I should have explained the syntax for your descriptions here. As you can see, that it says English only here. What it's looking for is adjectives and nouns. So adjectives means describing things, and nouns just means things or people. So what won't work are instructive prompts. Adobe on their website says instructive prompts like fill the area or create a scene doesn't work. You need to use describing words or nouns, things or people, etc. So I'm going to type in elephant drinking from lake. Now this is one of the issues that I found, that even though I said drinking from lake, it's actually facing the other side. So let's see what options I've got. Now this is a little bit better, and this is probably what I'm after. So if I zoom in a bit, you can see that it's actually also created the reflection as well as the shadows here. This is probably what I'm after. This is a little bit strange. I don't think that elephants have two tails. I could be wrong. Some biologists could tell me. So as you can see, that it's not 100% perfect, but it does get you probably 70 or 80% there. Let's try something else. Going to fit it to screen, Command or Control 0. And I'm just going to try to put a palm tree here. Now I've got my normal lasso tool here. What I want to show you is that you don't have to keep going up to here and then clicking on this option while you've got the lasso tool here, or press Shift L to cycle through it. So if I have my normal lasso tool and I want my polygonal lasso tool, what I can do is press Option or Alt on my keyboard and then click once and then just draw out what I want, click once here. I'm not dragging my mouse, click and then click. And then when I want to return it back to my normal lasso tool, I release Option or Alt on my keyboard, and then to activate the normal lasso tool, now I'm clicking and dragging my mouse to use the normal lasso tool here. But that's not what I want. I just wanted to show you that nifty shortcut there. So I'm just going to draw out a box here. I could have used the regular marquee tool, but I just wanted to show you how to switch from the normal lasso to the polygonal lasso. Now that I've got a selection, let's type in palm tree swaying in breeze. Now, I've done this a number of times and it didn't really work, so let's see what it will give us. I'm going to zoom in here and it's giving me a stick, some kind of a pole here. So let's see whether there are better options. Now, I don't know why that palm tree means a stick to Adobe AI. But this is just another instance where it just doesn't work 100%. So the last thing that I want to do with this picture is I want to see whether it can do falling snow on top of this picture. Now, I already know whether it can or can't, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So I'm just going to select the whole canvas, Command or Control A, and just click on here and go falling snow. And you can see that it didn't quite do it. Now, the reason why these are showing up here is because of my layer stack here. So if I just bump it up all the way to the top, I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut, Command or Control, Shift and right bracket key just to bump it all the way to the top. You can see that it's just given me a generic snow overlay. And if I cycle through that, it's all really the same. It hasn't really taken into account my picture. So this is not what I want. Now we can try different blend modes, but it doesn't really do what I'm after. What I wanted to do was, really incorporate the snow with the original image. So let's move on to the next one. So I'm going to open my other file, open, and click on this one. What I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to extend the image so I can see his legs here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, C for my crop tool, and just going to extend this all the way down. M for my marquee tool, just make sure I select a little bit of the image here. Now I've still got my fixed marquee size here, so let's remember to change that back to normal and deselect that by pressing Command or Control D. And let's do that again. I'm just going to use a little bit of the original image and then click on here, generate. Wow, I have no idea what this is. But you can see minus this bit here, whatever it is, it looks like a vacuum cleaner hose, but not quite. But if you ignore that, it does look pretty decent, right? The stance is a little bit awkward, but if I cycle through that, this looks a little bit better, and this one's just a little bit elongated here. So let's just settle on the second one. Now what I want to do here is want to show you one of the limitations, and it's an important limitation. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to make a selection of the man's sweater. Now my selection isn't perfect because it's not the point of my next point. So what I want to do is say, okay, well, I don't want a sweater here. I actually want, say, a singlet. I'm just going to press singlet here, generate. And it's going to come up with an interesting error. And this is the point I want to make. You can see here that the generated images removed because they violate user guidelines. Now you might be thinking, what's the user guidelines, right? The reason I believe that it's violating, quote unquote, violating Adobe's terms is because I'm asking it to generate bare skin. So you can see that if you take it to the nth degree, that showing bare skin might lead to unsavory activities. It could be pornography or even worse. So that's why Adobe has said, nope, you can't do it. Well, I didn't do the singlet. It can do, say, a short sleeve shirt, for example. So let's just try that. Short sleeve shirt. So this isn't the best here, but you can see that it hasn't rejected the command. So it is smart enough to pick up, well, okay, maybe a singlet is showing too much skin, but a t-shirt is okay. Now, I don't really know why a singlet isn't appropriate. Maybe a singlet in Australian English is different to US English. I don't know. I'm just going to quickly scroll through the options. And I'm probably going to stick with number 2. Now, before we move on, I just want to show you that this is a pretty cool, nifty trick. Now, if I want to change the color of this hair, I can, again, select it, do a rough selection. So what I want to do is select the area where the hair is going to be. I don't want to use my rectangular marquee tool. Otherwise, it will generate in areas that I don't want it to. So if I say black hair, it's generated black hair. Now, you don't have a choice of the style. Now, obviously, you can try to prompt it here, long black hair or long curly hair, etc. But when you generate the variations, you just have to pick one of the 3 or however many that you've generated. Now, let's just do one more. I'm going to add some glasses here, select the marquee tool, and something like this. I'm just going to put sunglasses. And that looks pretty cool, right? So I can move this contextual taskbar out of the way, just clicking on here. And let's cycle through that. Now, I don't know why there's a little bit of reflection here, but again, you can use traditional Photoshop tools to either mask that out or paint it over. Now, before we go, just for the fun of it, let's just add a background to this. So I'm going to select this model here by going to my object selection tool here. I'm going to inverse the selection by pressing Command or Control Shift I, or you can use this new button here to inverse the selection. So I'm just going to type in, say, football stadium. That's pretty cool. So let's cycle through that. So you can see that it's created some halos around this for some reason. So this isn't a retouching tutorial, so I won't retouch it. So it just to highlight that it's not going to be 100% perfect. So just make sure that your selection is 100%. So let's move on to the next one, which is... Now, this is Jersey Channel Islands, and this has a special place in my heart because I was lucky enough to work over there, and it's a beautiful island. So if you ever have the chance to visit it, make sure you visit in summer though. In the winter, it might be a little bit too grey and too cold, but in the summer, it's great. Now, the picture that you see in front of you is Mount Gory or Augur. It's a French pronunciation, and I know that the French will say that my pronunciation is terrible, so forgive me. But I'm using this photograph just to show you how Generative Fill can remove all these tourists and cars here. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool, L on the keyboard, just going to zoom in a little bit more and going to say, okay, I don't want this car here, not this person here. Now, I should have said that if you've made a mistake with your selection, you can add to your selection by pressing Shift on the keyboard, and you can see that the cursor has a plus icon there. And then if you want to subtract from your selection, you press Option or Alt on the keyboard, and that will subtract it from the existing selection. So I'm just going to undo that. So now that I've got a selection, let's click on, well, let's not click on Generative Fill here. I want to show you the 2 other options where you can access the Generative Fill. So with your selection active, let's right click on this, and down here you have Generative Fill, or you can go to Edit and go to Generative Fill here. So either way, there's 3 ways. It's just easier perhaps just to click this button here. But just for this time, I'm just going to click on this, and it's going to say, well, what prompt do you want? I'm not going to enter any prompt because I just want to remove all these objects and people here. It's going to do exactly the same thing. It's just a slightly different interface. Now, isn't that great? You can say goodbye to crowded tourist place because you can just magic them out afterwards. Well, some people might say, well, why don't you just use content-aware fill? Well, there is a difference. That's the spoiler. So I'm going to turn off this layer here, and let's just do a selection again. Let's make sure that our background is selected. Let's press Shift Delete. That's Shift Backspace if you're on a PC. And I've already got it on Content Aware, and I'm going to press OK. Now you can see that it's much faster because it's processing on your own device. But the quality of this isn't that great, right? Because what it's doing, it's not generating out of nothing. I mean, not that Generative Fill is generating out of nothing. It's using Adobe stock. But this is using the pixels around this very image and just replicating it, which is why you see these weird little patterns here. Now, you can say, well, you didn't really do it the proper way, Hoi. So the proper way, if I just undo that, is with my selection still active here. Let's go to Edit and use this Content Aware Fill option. And the difference is that it gives me an option of where I want to sample. Now, I don't want to sample the wall of the castle here, so I'm going to just paint that out, right? And I can just be as selective as I want. Now I can add to the selection, just make sure that my plus icon is here. I can subtract from the selection with this option still selected by pressing Alt here. So it really doesn't matter what I do, it's still generating it from existing pixels, and it doesn't really have the effect that we want. And that's the difference between Generative Fill and Content Aware Fill. Now I'm going to switch on the layer back here, which I really like. And the one thing that I want to show you is that if you want to remove this bollard here, for example, I just want to highlight a really quick point about also selecting its shadow here. So don't forget to select any shadows your object is casting if you want to remove that. So isn't that great? I mean, I'm just amazed by this. Now let's just test this a little bit more. I'm going to make a selection here. I just want say a window. Why? Because I don't know. I just want to test it out. I'm going to generate this. And this is obviously not a window. So now this looks like what I'm after. And this is probably okay as well. You can regenerate it, etc. Now you can see that the amazing thing that it's also cast a shadow, but you can see that it hasn't casted the shadow in any random direction. It has read the image around it and knows that the shadow is pointing downwards. Now the last thing I want to do with this image is extend this out. Now we'd already done that with the balloon image, but that's with landscape. And you can pretty much put anything into landscape and it sort of blends in. Here it's got very distinctive architecture and there's roads, etc. So I want to see how it actually deals with it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So just extend the canvas a little bit bigger. Just press Shift and Option to resize that. Something like this. Press OK. And press M to activate my marquee tool. I'm going to select inside this picture here because I'm going to inverse that. I'm going to press this, and when I inverse it, it also selects a little bit of the image here, which is what I want. You always have to select a little bit of your original image. Let's generate the fill. This is not too bad. It's not the greatest. But see, this is wow. At this distance, you won't notice that there is a difference at all. Now, this is also great, but you can tell that the problem is with the people. Now, AI in generally has issues with generating people, especially the face and the fingers and hands. Okay, so I mentioned that the AI isn't great for faces and hands, so let's just demonstrate that. So let's go to File, Open, go to number 4, And I've got this model here. The model is in focus and then the background isn't. And I'm going to test out two things here. The first thing I'm going to test out is how it generates faces and hands. So let's select our marquee tool here. I'm just going to select a box here, something like this. And I'm going to type in something like woman hugging man. Now, I've done this a number of times, and this is probably one of the better ones. Now, you can see that it's slightly mucked up his face, and the face isn't that great. Now, you can see that it's generated the shadows here. It's also generated the sleeve, which matches the jacket here. This is also not too bad, but it's not perfect. Now, this is the point about the hands here. Now, the reason why AI has difficulty in drawing hands is because what it's doing is referencing all the hands in Adobe stock, all 344 million photos that Adobe stock has, and then just try to regenerate the hands in this particular pose. Now, fingers and hands is not like, for example, the ear, where the ear just stays in one place. It doesn't contort, whereas the fingers and hand has to contort or have to wrap around an image depending on the size and the place and the shape, etc. And with that many variables, you can start to understand why AI has difficulties with generating fingers and hands, etc. Now, this picture isn't that great because it's actually remodeled my model here. So if I just watch his face here, if I just turn off this layer here, it's actually given the model some plastic surgery and regenerate the whole face, which I didn't want. And this one is also similar. Now, this is okay. And this is probably, they're all okay. I mean, they're not the greatest, but that's the reason why I'm showing it to you. Now you can see that the resolution of the image sort of matches the original image here. And that's the difference between, say, Generative AI by Adobe and other platforms like Midjourney, where you have to type in, hyper-realistic, photorealistic, etc. You don't need to do it here because Adobe does try to match the resolution. But remember, the caveat is that the area that it generates is only 1024 pixels wide and high, and then it just stretches it out. Now, I'm going to fit it to screen. I'm just going to turn off this layer here. And I want to show you another thing where you can see that the background is blurry. And the fantastic thing about Adobe is that it recognizes the blurry background. So if I just make a shape here, something like this, and type in something like dog walking, you can see that it actually matches the blur here, right? So if I just scroll through that, so that's probably running instead of walking, but that's not the point of this. The point is that it actually matches the depth of field here. And you saw in the beginning here that it noticed that the man is in focus, so the generated person here is also in focus. Okay, so let's get on to the next picture, or should I say pictures, because I'm going to merge two pictures into one and then get Generative Fill to see whether it can combine the two. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I've got 5A, and then going to press Shift, 5B, Open. And it's going to open in two different tabs, which isn't a problem. I'm going to select my Move Tool V on the keyboard, click, drag, and then going to put it into this. Let's expand our canvas, C on the keyboard. I'm just going to zoom out a bit, Option or Alt on the keyboard, and scroll wheel mouse down. Just going to stretch it out here, something like this. Accept the change, revert back to my Move Tool V on the keyboard, and then just do this. Maybe I want it on the other side. I'm going to press Command, click on this and move it. Oh, I can't move it because it's a locked background layer. I'm going to unlock it. Try it again. Command, click, and then just move that on this side. And the reason why I want to move it on the other side is because of the water here. So I wanted to somehow join this water to this water here. And I'm leaving a little bit of gap here. So M for my marquee tool, I'm going to select a little bit inside this one here and then inside this one here, and then click on this generate. Now you can see that it had a hard time. Let's just zoom in a little bit more. You can see that it's had a hard time reconciling the two images. It's just giving me basically one image here to the left and then one image to the right. Let's see whether the other variations, no, they're all really the same. So it's thought about it and went, not too hard. I'm just going to give up and give you two separate images. What I've tried is I'm going to extend the canvas even more so it has room to sort of manipulate this photo and reconcile it with this. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of this layer. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more, crop it out to even more, and just stretch this out a little bit more. Now I'm going to ask Photoshop to fill in this space. Now this is a big slice that it has to do, so it's probably going to take a little bit longer. Now you can see this is much better, so I'm going to fit it to screen, Command or Control 0. So given more space, it's sort of reconciled this back to this one here. So let's see what it can do. So this isn't great, and this is probably a cheat by putting this right in the center. Again, I can add in picture here, say man sunbathing. And if I zoom in, that's a man sunbathing. So let's fit it to screen again. So the lesson here is that you really need two similar images. You can't really have two very, very distinct images. Otherwise, the AI would just say, I don't know how to handle this. I'm just pretty much going to give you back two separate images. Now let's move on to the next image where I'll show you how you can add reflections. Go to File, Open, click on the last one. Now this one, I'm going just to put her a hat here, and you can see that there is a reflection here. So if I generate the hat here and there's no hat in the reflection, then it's not going to be great, right? So I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to add to the selection by pressing Shift on the keyboard and then just drawing out a similar rectangle here. Click on Generative Fill. Now let's ask Generative AI to put a blue cap on her. Now you can see that the hat isn't perfect, and this is not what we're critiquing, but you can see that it's tried to reflect the hat here. So let's see the other options, and it's not too bad. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the cap, but I was just testing for the reflection here and it's okay. So the last thing that I want to do is that you can actually create a composite from a blank canvas. So let's just do that. I don't have an image, obviously, because we're going to start off with a blank canvas. Get a file, new, and because Adobe generates 1024 by 1024, let's just use that. Now with the resolution here, I've got it at 300. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to purposely choose CMYK and 16-bit. Now there is a reason why I've chosen that, so I'm going to click Create, and let's just fit it to screen here. I'm going to select my marquee tool, M on the keyboard, and I'm just going to select this bit here because I want to put something like a sandy beach. Now I'm going to click in here. You notice that this has come out as well as this has been grayed out. So it says that Generative Fill can only work with RGB 8-bit or 16-bit. It doesn't work with Grayscale, Lab, or CMYK. So make sure that your images are RGB 8 or 16-bit. Now that I've got a CMYK canvas, I don't want to recreate the canvas again. So what I can do is go to Image, Mode, and just select RGB. Now if I want to change the bit depth, I can also go back to Image, Mode, and then select whatever bit depth. I just so happen to have it on 16. We can choose 8. It doesn't really matter. Now you can see that my Generative Fill option has come back. It's not grayed out. So let's click on that and type in Sandy Beach. I'm going to make another selection with my marquee tool and something like this. What I want is, say, distant mountains. Let's just cycle through that, see which one I like. this is probably what I'm going for. And then just to fill in this space here, let's just click here, drag it out. I've probably dragged out more of what I wanted, so it's going to probably replace these mountaintops here. So I'm going to select my lasso to L on the keyboard, going to press Option to bring out the subtract option. Just going to go inside the mountains, and I want, I don't know, northern lights. Let's just cycle through our options. Probably want to pick this one here, and you can see that it has created the northern lights here, but it hasn't adjusted the lighting here, obviously, because our selection here was only on the top area of the canvas. So disregarding this poor composition, I just wanted to show you what is possible. So I'm going to make another selection here. I'm going to say I want a castle. Now this looks okay to me. It's not the greatest composition, but I just want to show you that with your imagination, you can keep generating whatever you like. So let's just keep going. Maybe something like this. I'm going to create something in the foreground, something like this. Add to selection, pressing Shift on the keyboard, something like that. And let's just generate a palm tree. Now, it couldn't do it in the very first image that we did. So let's just see whether it can do it here. Well, what do you know? It does know what a palm tree is. So here it's generated 3 variations of the palm trees, which is better than the stick that we had right in the beginning. So the last thing that I want to show you is that the order in which you generate your generative layer does matter. Now you can see that this layer here, which is the palm tree layer, has obscured or actually done away with the castle that we've generated. If I turn this off, then the castle comes back. It's not only obscuring it, it's actually just removed it altogether. So I would have expected that I could see a little bit of the tops of the castle here, but I actually don't. And that's because that this palm tree layer, if I just use my move tool V on the keyboard, that you see that it's actually generated all these new pixels in the shape of the selection that I made. And when generating this palm tree, it sort of disregarded the castle that I made. So just keep that in mind when you're generating your layers. So this is the amazing tool that is Adobe's Generative Fill. How do you feel about it? Do you feel excited? Do you feel scared for your job? And what does it mean for the creative industry? Me, personally, I think it's a great thing. It will change the way we work, but I think for the better. At this stage, the generative AI will only get better. So all the imperfections that I walked you through, it will only get better. And that doesn't mean that we should feel threatened. For me, it's better to learn about all these new technologies so we can figure out how we can use it in our workflow, which is the point of this tutorial, instead of burying our heads in the sand and say, well, this doesn't exist, I don't want to know about it. That's not going to solve anything. And I'm really curious about what you think of generative AI. So leave me a comment and let's start a conversation.